Hi, Susie, are you there? Good evening, Susie. So we'll start at 7 on the dot, which I think is in a minute or so. But just so you know, all here, so we'll be ready to start as soon as the live stream started. So I'll give you a nod in about a minute, asking to confirm the live stream has started, then I'll start the meeting. Thanks, Susie. Cheers. Oh, perfect. Well, good evening and welcome to this meeting of the VOWH White Horses Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Max Thompson. I'll be chairing this meeting. This meeting is being held at our office in Abbey House, Abingdon. Voting members are here in person as required, but officers and public speakers have been given the opportunity to join remotely if they wish through Microsoft Teams. The meeting is being streamed live on the Council's YouTube channel for public viewing. I have 5 housekeeping announcements. Firstly, for those joining remotely, when you're not speaking, please ensure your microphone is muted and your camera is off. If you share a presentation on the screen, please stop sharing as soon as it's not needed. Public speakers must only have their cameras on and be unmuted when addressing the committee or answering questions of clarification in their designated slots. Number 2 for us in the room is evacuation procedure. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate the building by the nearest exit, which is just to your right out there, and then please assemble at assembly point 9, which is just outside the building over there. On arriving at the meeting, you should have read the emergency evacuation procedure and signed the fire register. Please inform Democratic Services if you have not done so. Thirdly, mobile phones, please ensure they're on silent or off. Number 4, members of the public who wish to leave the meeting after the item they're concerned with has been debated. You're very welcome to do so, but please do so quietly. And then finally, when the meeting has ended, I'll ask for confirmation the live stream has ended. At that point, please make your way out of the building, remembering to sign out as you leave. And then final point, this is a meeting in public, not a public meeting. And I ask that members of the public attending both those in person here and those virtually ensure they do not shout out or disrupt the committee's deliberation outside of those who've registered to speak in their allocated slots. Right, and with that, I move on to item 2, apologies for absence. Emily Barry, do we have any apologies this evening?
Yes, we've received 2 apologies this evening from Councillor Cheryl Briggs and Councillor Jill Rayner.
Okay, thank you very much. And would you mind taking a roll call?
Absolutely. Councillor Ron Batstone.
Present.
Councillor Jane Hannaby.
Present.
Councillor Scott Horton.
Present.
Councillor Robert Madison.
Present.
Councillor Mike Bighills.
Present.
Councillor VOWH.
Present.
And Councillor Max Thompson.
Present.
Thank
you. Okay, thank you very much. I now turn to item 3, which is the minutes of the meeting 27th of March. Can someone propose that we accept those as a correct record? Councillor Hannaby.
Yes, I'd like to propose minutes.
Thank you very much. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Batstone, thank you very much. Is there any debate? All those in agreement? Those against? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. I now turn to item 4, which is declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations of interest this evening? Okay, I can't see any. I now turn on to urgent business. So Adrian Duffield, do we have any urgent business this evening?
None, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Then turn to public participation. I confirm that we have a number of people who've registered to speak on the 2 applications we're hearing this evening. I also confirm that we received a number of statements which were circulated prior to the meeting and have been read by the committee. We may make reference to them in either our questions or in our debate. So with that, I now turn to agenda item 7, which is the first of our 2 applications this evening, which is Gateways and Hartwell Hill. Catherine Canavan, I believe you're presenting on this.
Yeah.
Excellent, thank you very much.
The first application to be considered is a proposal for 2 4-bed dwellings at gateways on Harcourt Hill. To start with, I would like to make a correction to the plans list shown under condition 2. This relates to plans OP 1001, 2, 3 and 4, which refer to tree constraint plans and draft details. These have been removed. The full tree protection plan and methodology are to be secured under condition 6 if the proposal is approved, and this therefore supersedes these draft plans. This slide shows the elevations of the 2 dwellings of the current proposal. Members will be aware that there have been a series of applications on the site in recent years, 3 of which have been for proposals to subdivide the sites. The previous 3 applications were refused and dismissed at appeal. The grounds of appeal largely centred on design, scale, conflict between the layout and the established character and spacing of the surrounding area, and impact on amenity. For background, I will briefly run through the slides of the previous applications. This is the 2020 application. You can see it's split between one facing onto Harcourt Hill and the back of the rear of the site facing onto Stanton Road, and 2 sizable properties proposed. And a later one in 2020, again, there's the same arrangement on site, one very large property and a smaller one to the rear that's still large in size. More recently in 2022, 2 properties were proposed, facing onto Harcourt Hill, but one with the access still onto Stanton Road, with garages to the front, and deep within the site. And this one was also refused. The following slides provide an indication of the character of Harcourt Hill, which is made up of large dwellings and spacious plots, large open areas to the front and rear, and broken up by trees and planting along the frontages and in the gardens. This slide shows the frontage of gateways with Southfield on the left, and a side elevation which faces onto Stanton Road opposite 6 Elms. The committee report sets out in detail why, having assessed this proposal on its own merits, it now has a design, scale and relationship with neighbouring dwellings that complies with policy. The building lines are now similar to properties along Harcourt Hill, and the removal of the garages on the previous scheme has allowed the frontage to be opened up. The bulky addition to the rear on previous schemes has been brought in significantly, and accommodation and dormer windows in the roof have been removed. The proportions of the dwellings now clearly read as 2-storey dwellings and sit within an appropriate amount of space in their own plots. The space around the dwellings ensures trees can be retained, respecting the green character of the area. The reduction of the bulky roof space and consolidation of roof lines means that the proportions of dwellings are in keeping with the design and detailing of nearby residential properties. In coming to this decision, regard has been had to policy CP37 of the local plan, policies HS1 and HS2 of the North Hinksey neighbourhood plan, and the character assessment which underpins these policies, and the general built form principles of the joint design guide. In officer's opinion, while the 2 buildings are narrower and slightly deeper than neighbouring properties, the development respects the character of the area. These differences are considered to contribute positively to the mix of dwellings in the local area without detracting from the established character. The landscaping scheme and tree protection scheme has been secured by condition to ensure that the green streetscape character is retained and enhanced. Policy HS2 of the neighbourhood plan restricts heights to 12 metres or less in this area. Both dwellings are below 8.4 metres, but given the ground level rises up away from Southfield, it is recommended that an additional levels condition is added. This will ensure that, if approved, the dwellings are built at the agreed height as measured from the existing ground level and no higher. In terms of biodiversity, the rear garden of the site is not significant in terms of habitat value. and is characterised as mown lawn. Given the relatively small scale of the development, officers are satisfied that a 10% uplift can be achieved through bird and bat boxes and landscaping. There are no obstacles to this being achieved through a suitable biodiversity enhancement and landscaping scheme, and it is felt to be most appropriate for this to be secured by condition. Finally, revisions were made to the proposal to correct the red line application area, confirming that there is access to the public highway for both dwellings. The roof lights on the side elevation of plot 1 have been raised to prevent overlooking to Southfield. The relationship between gateways and Southfield can be seen on the slide here. While it is recognised that the site has a planning history of applications which have not been successful, the current proposal has been assessed on its own merits, and the design, scale, mass and spacing of the dwellings responds appropriately to the character of the surrounding area now. Officers conclude that the development complies with policy and recommend approval. I pass back to the Chair and Committee for further consideration of this application.
Thank you very much. I'm sure we'll return to you for some questions once we've heard from our speakers on this application. Our first speaker on this application is Adam Rankin, a representative of Botley and North Hinksey Parish Council. Mr. Rankin, are you there?
Yes, I am here indeed, Chair.
Excellent. Good. Well, we can hear you and we can see you. Oh, it's gone a bit dark, so give me 1 second. Hang on. Yes, we can hear you and we can see you. And you'll have 3 minutes from when you're ready.
Okay, right. Okay, let's go then. So Botley and North Hinksey Parish Council are opposed to the application for a number of reasons. Policy HS1 of the North Hinksey Neighbourhood Plan dictates that any new development should respect and enhance the character of the area and make a positive contribution to the identity of North Hinksey. New housing should take account of the scale, grain and size of the surrounding properties as laid down in the neighbourhood plan character assessment of the area. This is also clear policy in policy CP37 of the local plan, and we feel that this application goes against the local distinctiveness of the area. Citing 2 properties and splitting this single plot goes against these policies. The application shows very narrow plots, with the dwellings having to be somewhat squeezed onto the site. Splitting the site lengthways also affects the street scene. It does not enhance, but it rather detracts from it, indicating a higher concentration of housing going against the character of the area. These dwellings are not sited transversely on the site as per the majority of the properties in the area, again, against the grain of the area. This also adds to the lack of privacy and overlooking for each property, plus the resultant visual intrusion for Southfield next door. The design of these 2 properties is almost identical. The Harcourt Hill neighbourhood is characterised by individual properties. Recently, in the same vicinity, the site at Whitwick was reformatted in line with policy guidelines to split a site that was far wider than this one at Gateways. 2 individual dwellings were designed to fit in well with the surrounding properties, was actually welcomed by the neighbourhood. The site formerly Field End, now developed into Pembroke House and Lincoln House, is quoted in a proposal as an example of how the site could be split. The proposal Gateways is much narrower than this plot and not deemed suitable to be split, in our opinion. The application shows no garaging with a very tight and impractical parking arrangement. This is unrealistic. We believe such arrangements would lead to shuffling of vehicles for which no swept path diagrams have been submitted. This combined with the location so close to a junction, we fear that the access and egress arrangements would lead to an unsafe scenario. This arrangement would also lead to delivery vehicles, of which there are many these days, having to stop on a junction. We haven't seen how it can increase the biodiversity of the site by an appropriate amount. No documentation has been included. We understand from neighbours that the dimensions shown in the application may well be inaccurate, and would request that quoted dimensions could be verified in some way before any application should be granted. So there have been a good number of applications for this site to add a further property to the site. None of these have been granted. So overall, Botley and North Hinksey Parish Council feel that the site in this neighbourhood would not be suitable for two dwellings that appropriately fit in with the character of the Harcourt Hill development.
Mr. Rankin, thank you. Slightly over 3 minutes, but by a matter of seconds, so that's good. Right, okay, let's see if there are any questions from the committee for you. Are there any questions? I can't see any, so I'll say thank you very much for joining us tonight, Mr. Rankin.
Lovely.
And I'll turn to our next speaker. Our next speaker is David Wyatt, who I believe is speaking in opposition to this application. Mr. Wyatt, are you here?
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Please. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Wyatt. As with all our speakers, you'll have 3 minutes when you're ready, and you'll get a 30-second warning.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
On behalf of a substantial number of Harcourt Hill residents, we ask the Planning Committee to refuse permission that this application is contrary to the development plan, particularly local plans CP 37, 44, 46, DP 23, and the neighbourhood plans HS 1 and 2, and the NPPF. It is out of character with the North Hinksey area. The North Hinksey Parish Neighbourhood Plan describes Harcourt Hill as an extremely green and leafy estate where the houses generally sit on the large plots and are generously spaced. The plan under Appendix 2 in the report, which you were shown, shows the general wide frontages and spacings of the plots down Harcourt Hill of 21 metres width. The plot is about 27 metres, divided into two plots 13 to 40 metres as the site layout. That site layout shows the proposals to be totally contrary with the typical alignment, grain, character of the neighbourhood, which is defined by houses with wide frontages facing towards the road and narrow sides, with setbacks both on Harcourt Hill and Stanton Road. The narrow frontages and deep sides, as are proposed here, are an anomaly. The proposal would bring also impact on the street scenes of both Harcourt Hill and Stanton Road, causing harm to this corner plot, removing the sense of verdant spaciousness at this crucial point of entry into Stanton Road. The long featureless flank wall of Stanton Road, plot 2, is totally at odds with the character of the area. Both houses sit close up against the boundaries of their respective plots. Plot 1 to Southfield, plot 2 1 metre away from Stanton Road fence and hedges, which is not shown on the elevations. There is no space for garages, and both plots have lost almost all of their front gardens for access, turning space and parking. It is not shown how this will be achieved, but the generous spacing and proportion, those defining features of Harcourt Hill, would be entirely lost. The principle of this type of development, as described above, was decided against at paragraph 5 of the dismissed appeal of the last application on the site. The neighbourhood plan also refers to the huge variety of building materials and designs on display as characteristic of Harcourt Hill. By contrast, the current proposal is for two houses with identical architectural features, language, and the same material palette, creating uniformity of style. This is contrary to the development plan, and defined as a reason for dismissing a recent appeal on a site in the area. Squeezing in two dwellings has direct harm on the amenity of adjacent Southfield, with overlooking dominance and visual intrusion caused by its closest of plot 1. Increasing the developed area of the site and the loss of hedging has direct consequences for biodiversity. There is no assessment submitted by the developers to show how the loss of biodiversity could, and there will be, and no plan showing how the now mandatory 10% net gain would be achieved. This alone is grounds for refusing planning permission as decided by the inspector on a nearby site. And since the 2nd of April, we understand it is now unlawful. There is contradictory drawings affecting the visual landscape. Some of the development depends on matters outside of the site and red line and control of the applicant.
I'm afraid we've run out of time, so if you could just sum up very quickly.
In attempting to solve what might be unsolvable, too many conditions are suggested. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. There may be some questions for you, so I'll just ask members of the committee if they've got any questions or clarification. Councillor Madison.
Thank you. We've seen applications on this site previously for larger buildings. The buildings we see now are much reduced in scale. The question is, do you see any arrangement of buildings on this site that would be acceptable, or is the idea of having two houses there just not acceptable at all?
I think it's summed up by the inspector on the previous appeal, where he said that contrast to many others nearby, the proposed dwellings would be sited close together. the relatively large depth of the proposal resource in Stanton Road, and for these reasons, the proposal would appear as a large mass of built form across the site, giving a cramped and overdeveloped form that would fail to reflect the spacious characteristics of its surroundings. So I think the answer to that is no. One big house there, one nice house, suitable with good architectural features.
So I have just a couple of quick questions. So you referenced Appendix 2, which we saw earlier, and I'll well, we can put it up a bit later, but you might be more familiar without even looking at it. I noticed on this, and I'm aware it might not be perfect, that quite a few of the properties neighbouring do seem to go up to the boundary line. Is that correct, or is that wrong? It looks from this that Southfield, Treetops, Long Lodge, Russell. So I'm just, in terms of, I'm just trying to get my head around this. So the next 4 properties look like they go up to the build form goes up to the boundary line.
Well, I think there's space between the two, and the format is of most of them is they're small, like shed-like or garages like that.
Sure. So it's like it's a narrower bit. Is that right?
A narrower bit, yes.
Okay. And perfect. Thank you very much. And then just one other question. So, and there's no reason why you would necessarily know this. Do you know of the nearby properties shown on Appendix 2? What's the I guess what's the narrowest width of any of the other properties? I'll ask the same question to our officer later, but I just wanted to give you the opportunity, if you did know, to.
Well, there was a property further down the hill that was split up some time ago, and there the overall site was something like 39 metres.
Sure. Is that Pembroke and Lincoln you're discussing? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
That was a much bigger site.
Perfect. Okay.
Originally, yes. But all these other ones are about 21 metres all the way down. In fact, Southfields is 22.5 metres, I think.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Are there any further questions, Mr. Warwick? In which to say thank you very much for your time this evening. Okay. And I now turn to our next speaker. Sorry, I've got my list here, which is Duncan Woolwich. Mr. Woolwich, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Good evening. We can hear you. We can see you. And as with everyone else,
yeah, apologies for that.
It's all right. No, 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for to Catherine for the presentation. The recommendation here is for approval, and obviously we fully accept the planning manager's decision to bring this committee, considering the history of applications and appeals for the various proposals over the past few years. We have worked collaboratively with Catherine and other planners on this application and have made a series of concessions in order to distill the previous designs to arrive at this recommendation, and which, were it not for the checkered history, might well have been approved under delegated powers. In terms of policy and design, I feel the detailed presentation sums us up very well. But just to rebut a couple of comments regarding the massing and the separation of buildings, obviously that was a major concern from the previous inspectors' reports, and obviously we've made a considered, I think the implication that this is a single mass now can be clearly demonstrated as false because when you look at the street view, because there's a good 4 or 5 metres between each to Southfield and then between the 2 plots, and then a good, these aren't within a metre of a boundary, they're well separated now. We've made all these concessions, reduced the sizes of these buildings down, and design itself has never been a particular issue. It's always been about the separation and of this plot into 2. Yes, we make a point of field end, which we think is pertinent because those houses are possibly 20% bigger than these in a possibly a 20% wider plot. So we think comparatively they relate. Regarding the biodiversity, obviously this application was submitted well in advance of the biodiversity net gain being implemented. But obviously, if there was a condition to be appended requesting an uplift, then I'm sure that will be acceptable. This obviously, because this has only just come in, the 12th of April, I think, wasn't it, or 2nd of April. So this was submitted some time ago. So obviously, if that is something that the council want to consider as a condition, we can certainly do that. Obviously, we wanted to reinforce that the statutory technical consultees concerning the drainage, the highways, the forestry have no objections to this, subject to the subsequent submission and approval of the planning conditions. So again, all the arguments against highway safety have all been dispelled as long as we produce the right information in terms of access, manoeuvrability on site, and which will then be approved by the relevant parties. I can only ask the committee to give. Yeah, I can only ask this committee to give this matter the most careful consideration, considering the history we've had on this site, and we want to achieve some kind of something on this site, and I welcome the opportunity to address the questions the committee may have. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Woolwich. I'll ask now if any members of the committee have any questions for you. Councillor Batstone.
Yes, I noticed for plot 1, the 3 roof lights.
Yes.
Now, plot 2 doesn't have any roof lights, and it is causing considerable problems to neighbouring properties, I think. So why do we need roof lights on the plot 1?
No, that's a fair point. The reason why we have designed plot 1 is because of the topography and the sloping up of the site away from Southfield. As we acknowledge that the impact on Southfield is going to be much more than the current house. So we've made the concession to have it on a single story at the nearest point to Southfield, and then obviously sloping the roof up. And we had a conversation with the planner not too long ago where she requested that those roof lights were raised so that the sills are at least 1.7 metres above floor level, so there are no overlooking issues caused by those. But if those were absolutely not, if there was a decision to be made that, you know, would we have those removed, then that is a possibility. But ideally, we'd have them just for amenity to those rooms. They're not required for any kind of fire escape. They're just for bathrooms and additional windows. So worst case, we will take them off. But we think if we protect them by having the sills at a certain height, that should be okay.
Okay, thank you for that.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Piggles.
Yeah, just ask how car parking, given these properties won't have garages.
Yeah.
And there's no real detail about how car parking will work. Just explain the thinking behind the lack of a garage and the large houses probably.
Absolutely. When we resubmitted this scheme and Catherine came back to us, Ms. Canavan came back to us saying that she has still had serious concerns about the massing and the appearance from the front. And if you look at Field End, the 2 houses, which, you know, just a few doors up, their garages are quite prominent at the front, and I think it was decided if we simply remove them, because garages are not required, they have a, you know, people don't tend to put cars in them, but so we didn't think it was going to affect the marketability of the houses. So we've provided a generous area, and obviously part of this process going forward from the highways point of view is that we have to evidence that obviously minimum amount of cars can access and leave the site safely in forward gear, and we will be submitting information to that end.
Yeah, that's always a personal worry of mine about these kind of situations is that garages are storage spaces in reality in the modern home. So therefore we see a load of applications then for kind of storage places and sheds in these areas. But
again, that's not part of anything we're planning to do. I mean, we wouldn't propose any sheds or any kind of structures at all to the frontage. We want to keep it as green and as open as possible. We want, you know, these houses will ultimately be for sale, and to keep the greenery and the soft edges to the site will be just as important to us and you, and obviously the purchasers.
Mr. Woolwich, I've got a question about the design of these two. So we've heard that the design is going to be very similar. I can't remember if it was said they were going to be identical. So maybe you could comment on this. Like, when we're thinking about design and the character of the area, we've heard from our speakers that the character of the area is such that they're quite distinctive, the houses along this row. So what, if any, are the distinctions in terms of the building materials, the window design, or things like that in this application? Or is there anything that makes them distinct, I guess?
I mean, ultimately, people have said that the houses along the road are architectural merit. I would say they're very different. I wouldn't say there's any particular architectural gems down that hill. Essentially, I mean, the design, like I said before, the design has never been a particular issue. We've made them relatively similar, essentially to appeal to these are going to be for sale, and they will be made of high. We have to submit material samples, so we may choose to do a different roof tile for each plot. The details of the fenestration we want to make these as attractive as possible. It's in our interest to make these as attractive as possible. We have put bay windows on which are reminiscent of other houses down the street. I do take certain umbrage with people saying they're what I call an executive developer kind of house. They're meant to be attractive to the biggest number. Then they're not trying to be modern, they're not trying to be contemporary as such, they're trying to just be traditional design, similar features, certainly Southfield, which is where we've taken a lot of the cues in terms of the roof line, the roof pitch, the window sizes. So it kind of, we think they relate quite well to that house.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions for Mr. Woolwich? In which case I'll say thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
And I now turn to any questions we've got for our officers. Does anyone have any questions for Catherine Canavan? Councillor Hannaby.
Yes, I think obviously there's been some effort to reduce the bulk, because we can see that where the blue line was. So there's been quite a lot of effort. And I believe that they do go up to the boundary, but we can build on the boundaries now. Presumably they have got a footpath, etc., around the houses.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so it's all exactly what we can do now, etc. Obviously we would like them to be able to go into and turn around and come out. And we've heard that we've got to do a design and that's got to be passed, etc. Do we do that prior to, when would this be, is it subject to, if we do give permission, would it be subject to that?
The design itself is fixed at what's in front of you, but by condition we can ask for materials, and yeah, to make sure they're high quality materials and that they do relate to the area.
And should anybody want to in the future put a garage in there, they would have to come to planning.
Yes. Yeah.
Exactly. So,
and again,
so if someone wanted it, and it would probably be at the front, as sometimes houses do that, they would have to come to planning. So
have to come to planning, and the same considerations in terms of what we've been looking at: openness of frontage, keeping the green character at the front. That would all be the same considerations.
Thank you.
So Catherine, so I can get a bit of clarity there. So if we were minded to approve this and we wanted to condition on materials, so the design, would we be able to put a condition that the materials should be relatively distinct from the two properties? I assume that would be beyond what we could request.
It is, yeah.
Okay, because that would be us redesigning.
Yes.
Right. I just wanted to get clarity on that. Thank you. On that one. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
It would be for the applicant's agent to propose what the materials are,
Right.
and we either approve or refuse those details by condition.
Okay. All right. Any other questions?
Sorry.
Sorry.
No.
Councillor Hannaby.
No, I'm quite interested. I mean, obviously we know this hill. We've been up there on future occasions, on different occasions, and there are different types of housing on there and different types of bricks. It is quite a unique hill, exactly. But we have someone here that wants to use their plot in this manner. I've looked through the consultees and I haven't seen anybody objecting as such. Obviously I go through there to see.
Technical objective.
Yes, yes. I always go and listen and read those, etc. And as long as we have able to get in park and turn around, that's another bonus for this site as well, as this applicant has put this through. It's less bulky, because we've seen that. So it's, to my mind then, the officers believe that the applicant has done all they can to
Councillor Hannaby, we're maybe moving slightly into debate.
Well,
So
no,
have you got a question? Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't mean to.
I'm trying to form a question as such, but I think I've probably been given some answers in the nods and whatever,
Okay.
and we can go into debate.
We will move into debate once we've had a few more questions.
Yes.
Please, Councillor Pickles.
Question. So, having been up there, I mean, the houses in that area are characterised by quite wide frontages, and they all typically have because they're wide, they have quite large front gardens with kind of plenty of space for cars, and most of them have got garages that I could see. So you could argue that it is out of character on that basis, because these are quite narrow frontages by comparison. So you could argue it's out of character to the area that this proposed development, even though they are reduced in size. Could you just go through your thinking? What makes you feel that it is within character? Or it's not clear to me.
Okay, looking at the things on one of the earlier slides, but when you see
Can we
the
maybe put them back up if possible? Thank you.
That's really what I was trying to get at. What they know.
It's out of character.
The roundabout way.
I think this. There is the slide, I think that
Yes.
shows it well. So you can see the spacing of the existing properties, and this is with the proposal sort of inserted on top of that. Yes, there is, you can see it is narrower, but I think when you look along the building lines and the relationship between these two properties and the other ones, I think the spacing between the properties is fairly similar. You've still got good space to the front, or I accept it's less than the other properties, but you've still got space at the front and that green character, and then the rear space is pretty comparable with the other properties as well. I think if you want to see where Gatefield End, it's the yeah, it's these two just here.
The two, it's a sort of a mirror image of one.
Yes, yeah. And on the basis of the character of the design being similar, yes, it is similar. And I can see the other properties are individual designs. And I think that would have had a harmful impact if we'd been looking at 3 or 4 or a group of them. But the two by themselves, I think that still represents a very small sort of isolated development, a bit like Field Ends. It still stands out as being distinctive for those two properties.
Councillor Wilson.
Yes, yeah.
If I may, just a sort of technical one on 2 of the proposed conditions, condition 5 and 10. So provision of car parking, provision of cycle parking. I'm just trying to get my head around exactly how this works in practice. We're saying obviously the details of these facilities for parking both types of vehicles have to be provided prior to occupation. Can you just walk us through the process of how this works and why these why we're not looking at these sort of documents now, and what will happen between now and occupation?
It's a fairly standard approach to have parking details, back condition and cycle parking. What we've got to be sure of is there is enough space on site for it to be accommodated. Highways officers looked at it and is happy with the arrangement of space. So that we're happy that that's critical to this application, whether it's acceptable or not. And then the smaller detail can then be looked at by conditions. So that would be the type of enclosure. But in terms of can we fit enough cars on site, enough bikes on site that meet policy requirements, yes, we've confirmed at this stage.
Catherine, looking again at that though, do we know? I mean, if we don't know, we don't know. But the width of the 2 properties up to the north, which I think I can just remember called High Quarry and Tivoli. Do you know what the width of those plots are by any chance? Because I'm just trying to work out how much wider those are than if we're minded to approve these plots will be.
I did look at it, but it was before Christmas. I haven't got the figures.
I can have your rough measurement of Google Maps.
Okay, well, we can discuss that in debate. So rough measurement might be very helpful anyway.
It's slightly misleading because, of course, the reaches are part of the road makes it look a little bit wider. Because if you cycle, I cycled up there. If you go to the ones with 2 garages that face out onto the road, they're probably about 10-15% wider.
Okay, well, we'll come back to this debate. So a question, please.
Most development rights, there's a removal about having kind of window lights in the ones of plots. Can you walk through why that's necessary?
Yes, so that's on plot 1. So where the 3 roof lights proposed, we're happy that they've been put in at a level that's not going to impact on privacy or introduce overlooking. The risk is if more windows or roof lights were put in at a later date, they could have an impact on privacy. So we've removed those rights, which means windows openings could still be put in, but the resident would have to apply for those, so we can check that they wouldn't have an impact on.
In terms of permitted developments on plot 2, we're not restricting those. So what would be permitted? So I mean, how much higher could they go? Because one thing that there's been concern about in previous applications, appeals, etc., is so for example on plot 2, would they be able to build into the roof without seeking permission? Or I'm sorry.
Yeah, they could do a loft conversion, and they could do with dormer windows.
Okay, and we don't think it's a reasonable condition to place on restricting the plot 2.
Looking at that one within the context of the site, I don't think there'd be specific reasons to that plot to require it to be removed.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Madison.
Thanks, Chair. We've heard a couple of suggestions that the measurement of the frontage of gateways that we've seen might be inaccurate. I was just curious to hear your point of view on that.
Well, all the plans that have come in, we're happy that they're scalable and that they've got the right scale on them. That's been checked various points throughout the application. I'm happy that the measurements are accurate. I think the challenge can be sometimes that they're not written on there. There's no requirement for them to be written on there. Members of the public looking at it would have to scale it off the plans, which may not is not always as easy as officers having that tool easily available to them. That has been looked at throughout the application.
So, Catherine, I've got a question about the landscape. Well, it's about biodiversity. So we've got 2 conditions, one on landscaping and one biodiversity. We had a couple of statements in that said there were concerns about who, once we have those conditions in, who is responsible then for maintenance of the trees and ensuring things like bat boxes are not then taken down. I mean, how does that work? Would it be an enforcement matter then?
Yes, yeah. So we've we've asked for that detail to be provided. Once we've got a scheme that's acceptable, it has to be provided on site prior to occupation. So we'd be happy it's on site. If that changes, I think that the wording is and maintained as such. So if that's ever changed or removed, it would be a breach of condition, and we could then enforce.
Okay, and then in terms of the biodiversity uplift, I was getting a little bit confused when Mr. Woolwich was speaking about willingness to accept 10% biodiversity uplift and willingness to accept a condition on that basis. Maybe could you just provide a comment on that?
Yeah, I think the concern is, as I understand it, the concerns that have been raised by the public have been that if we haven't got a biodiversity metric at this stage, how do we know there's going to be a 10% uplift? One, I think for this scale of development, we're fairly satisfied that we can do it in relation to the biodiversity policy requirements, and knowing that it's the one protected species in terms of habitats. We know that there's bats in the local area. It is mown residential grassland, so we're starting from a fairly low point. And the scale of the development, we know that 3 bat boxes, bird boxes, and a suitable landscaping scheme that can enhance part of the site as a habitat, that is sufficient to secure the 10% uplift.
Could I ask, are there any other bat boxes in this hill in other people's houses?
I don't know.
So we're just taking the opportunity to do this.
This is a fairly standard approach.
But no, I'm asking. It is an opportunity then to put. But do we know that there's bats in this area, or are we assuming?
Yes, we've had informal discussions with the ecology officer. We know that there's bats have been identified. So this is a good opportunity with a new dwelling.
Well, exactly. That's what one does.
Are there any further questions before we move into debate? Can't see any, so I'm going to suggest we move into debate on this application. Would someone like to put forward a motion? Councillor Madison.
Thanks, Chair. I've listened carefully to everything that everybody has had to say and read all the representations we had prior to the meeting as well. I think it's one of the more interesting applications that we get where we are asked to weigh up our own interpretations. My view is that subdividing the plot in two is kind of a step too far for that road. I think the applicant has made concessions to the overall design in the height and the massing, but for me, it's not been successful in squaring the circle, so to speak, in getting two buildings on the plot in an acceptable way. That's the summary of the way I would view it. I don't want to belabor the point too much, so we've all heard, and I'm sure I've got our own opinions. But essentially, I think the narrowing the frontages is not in keeping with the other houses on the road. And
You need a proposal.
So I think I know where your motion is going, but if you could state it, I'll see if there's a seconder.
and I think that's more or less it.
Okay, so you're putting forward a motion to not approve this application based on character and local distinctiveness. Right. Let me see if we have a seconder, and then we'll move into debate.
I'm happy to second that motion. I agree with what Councillor Madison said. I would add to that I think going up there as well, it's a corner. The corner plot also, I think, disrupts that street scene for me as well, because when you look at it's quite a wide open kind of entrance to Stampton Road at the moment, and I do think it's out of character. I mean, I respect the officer in terms of those two houses that are further up the road. However, their plots are bigger and wider, and they incorporate a garage, which actually makes it a more practical proposition. I think the absence of the garage also, it probably got a material planning concern, but I just would question the practicality of such a large property with probably bringing a large number of cars and etc.
Right.
to bear.
So we have a motion to refuse this application on the grounds of character, design, and local distinctiveness, and also in line with neighbourhood plan policies. I guess HS1 and HS2 would fall within that, more or less. Right. I open that second. Oh, sorry.
CP37.
So CP37 and then HS2 and HS1, I think. Right. So I'll open the floor to debate.
I've had the motion, heard the motion, but I think that these houses could be put on this site. I think the officers have done a thorough job here. I know change isn't always liked by the residents of these areas, but they will fit in on the plot, and I believe they can access and turn around and will be able to satisfy highway. And I've looked at all the consultees, and I haven't found anything that concerns me, and they aren't concerned. So I think you've covered everything that you can do on these, the bulk, etc. The materials you're going to look at, so they'll be sympathetic. I hope they're not too different, because I think this is a one-off that you could make the materials enhance that area. But I've listened to local people, are not local, but from a building point of view and the fact that they can go in, I do agree with the officer that they could go in there, and it is a corner plot. So I think I'll just leave it there.
I think that points to debate. Councillor Horton.
Yeah, I think I find myself agreeing with Councillor Hannaby that although it would be narrower than the two plots would be narrower than others, we've been told somewhere in the region of 13-14 metres. Some measuring myself suggests it's closer to the upper end of that. For comparison, the two plots mentioned down the road, Tivoli and I forget the name of the other one, are approximately 17 metres wide and are built pretty much right up to the boundary line. Having the spacing between the house and the boundary line seems much more in keeping with the area to me on these properties than certain other ones that are nearby. I don't really have a huge amount more to add. The one other thing I will say is the condition that's been proposed around the sill height on those roof lights on plot 1, 1.7 metres. I appreciate that's relatively high, but I'm 0.8 something meters high without staying on tiptoes. And probably just about see out of those. I don't know if it's something. 1.7 meters is good. Whether we tweak that at all, I'm not sure.
Okay. We might come back to that.
Yeah.
Are there any other points on this application? Councillor Batstone.
I'm very torn on this one. I really am. I'm not happy with the roof lights. But apart from that, I think looking at the neighbouring plots, yes. I think probably it is going a bit too far. So I would, I think, agree with Councillor Madison's resolution that the better development on this site would be a single building.
So I think, I mean, I agree it's one of the more interesting applications we've seen, and I think it is a really difficult one. And I think that I'm sort of very torn on this personally. I think actually in terms of fitting 2 properties on this site, I think I'm with Councillor Hanneby. I think that you could fit 2 on this site. I'm glad that they're much smaller. I don't personally have as much issue with the sill height. I think 1.7 does resolve the overlooking. I guess though I have another issue with this application, and it's to do with distinctiveness. I think that it sounds like, if we look at the North Hinckley neighbourhood plan, it talks about enhancing the character of the area. It talks about the importance of distinctiveness and the types of properties. And I have listened to what's been said by the agent, by members of the public, and indeed by our officer on, well, it's 2 properties opposed to 3. But I would like to see a more distinctive design between these 2, and it's not our role in this committee to redesign these. So I'm not really helping, am I? Because I'm not entirely sure where I'm going on this. Because I think it's big enough for two properties, but I don't think these 2 properties are suitably distinct design. And I think that requiring a condition for viewing the materials will not resolve that, because we wouldn't be able to ask for materials to be different on the 2 sites.
I think I was thinking in a very similar fashion to you earlier on the whole, 2 properties being similar versus multiple properties being similar. I think what's swung it for me is just a quick look on Google Earth being the wonderful tool that it is. There are a handful of other paired properties in the area. And we've mentioned those 2, which are essentially mirror images of each other. We also see in Pembroke House there are 2 more back on the road, Stanton Road, which are certainly from far from annoying. There's not the street view of that road. Seem to be very similar to one another. So it's although it is not the norm necessarily, it is not unusual for there to be paired properties in that area, it seems.
Councillor Hannah.
Yeah, I think, I mean, this is an issue in any area now where people have large plots. And we've seen it all over our area in the Vale of people splitting plots, etc. But I think on this one itself, and you have got the neighbourhood plan, etc. But I think the officers have worked extremely hard on this to make these blend in and fit in and be of a style. And we aren't here really to impose our will on styles, are we? I think that's I do have to say that very loud and clear, because we all have different. But I do believe, and looking at the statutory comments, that I believe that there could be these 2 houses, although I know it won't probably be popular, but I'm looking at it from the planning point of view.
Understood. Right. Are there any further points of debate until we take a vote on this? Okay. We have a motion on the table to refuse the officer's recommendation to refuse permission for this application. All those in favour of that motion? Those against? Any abstentions? That motion passes. The application is refused. Right. And with that, I'm going to move on to our next application, which is phase 1 Valley Park Didcot. I'll just wait for anyone who wishes to leave the room to leave while we set up for that. Adrian Butler, I believe you're presenting on this one.
Chair. Okay, go to it. Thank you. No, he will. It was a success.
Yes. So we'll just wait 1 minute for people to sign out and then we will start again. Excellent. Right, moving on to the next item. So, Adrian, thank you for joining us. And if you could please present on phase 1 Valley Park Didcot.
Yeah, let's try and
Thank you.
sort out the presentation. Right, thanks, Jack. To start with some updates. Firstly, the landscape officer has responded to the latest consultation and has no objection and is satisfied with the landscaping scheme presented and the variety of trees proposed. And I need to update you on the Environment Agency response because what I have in the report is not entirely accurate in terms of their response to the application itself. What I've reported is basically a response to a question I'd asked the Environment Agency. Let me read out what they wrote to us. It's on the 12th of February, so this is their last response on the application, the most up-to-date response on the application. So they say, thank you for reconsulting us on the application following the submission of additional information. The applicant has responded to our previous comments on the 26th of October 2023 in respect of the suitability of the applicant's flood risk modelling. Modelling, as summarised in the submitted technical report, dated 19th of November 2023, confirms to our satisfaction that the flood flows will be contained within the local watercourses when considering high flood risk scenarios now and in the future due to climate change. We are therefore confident that the site is not considered to be at high risk of flooding, and we withdraw our objection to the application. Then they set out their position. They say that the proposed development will be acceptable if the following condition is included on the Planning Permission decision notice. And that condition is condition 9 at Appendix 1 of the agenda. Basically, it requires some work to be done to a couple of watercourses to ensure that the flood waters stay within those watercourses. And that's they've put the condition in detail, and they've put the reason to reduce the risk of flooding to the proposed development of future occupancy, which should be in the condition 9. So that is the updates. Okay. Application site is this parcel land here. And the access is from signalised junction on the A4130 to the north. That was permitted as part of the outline planning permission. And the road leading to the site, so there's the junction. And this road leading through here was permitted in March by planning committee. There's a reserve matters approval for 191 dwellings on my cursor keeps coming in and out. On this site here was permitted in September last year. And this is the proposed layout of the site. We're looking at a reserve matters application for 246 dwellings on the site. Reserve matters follows the outline planning permission granted. And those reserve matters that we're looking at tonight are the internal access arrangements, the appearance of the scheme, the landscaping, layout, and scale. The scale relates to basically the size of the houses. Valley Park is subject to a strategic design code for the site itself, which is being approved by the council. And it details the design parameters for the development. As officers, we believe that the scheme presented is in accordance with that design code. The design code seeks to deliver a strong frontage along this main road, strong enclosure and height. So we have 4 stories on this corner, dropping to 3 stories as we move through the site. And that is reflective of what we've got permitted on the opposite side of the road. And this is a scheme we permitted last September. The site is then moves into a series of secondary streets, such as this one, moving through the site, and there are various connecting roads off that. For example, this one, and these roads connecting. There's a different hierarchy in road as well, and all these road widths meet with the road widths which we negotiated with Oxfordshire County Council and the applicants as part of signing off the strategic design code for the site. Parking for the buildings on the front here, we've got courtyard parking for where there are flats, and then for where we have dwellings such as this arrangement, we have carports access off this secondary street from the rear. And again, that all accords with the design code for the site. In terms of affordable housing, we've got 35% affordable in accordance with our policy. And the affordable housing are in clusters, which our affordable housing officer supports. So we've got a cluster here, for example, one here, group there, over here, another group there in flats, group through there. So they're distributed across the site. And again, as officers were satisfied with that, and the affordable housing officer was satisfied with the distribution across the site. In terms of the flood matter that we were pointed out earlier, and I was discussing with the Environment Agency, the flood map shows flood zone 2 on parts of the site. And we have a condition on the outline plan permission that states no development, no built development in flood zone 2 and 3. And we've now got to the scheme shows houses in flood zones 2. So what the applicant has been doing is undertaken flood modelling, which they then presented to the Environment Agency, because the Environment Agency who put the flood maps together. And having considered that flood modelling amendments to it, the Environment Agency have come back to us and they've said, we're convinced that any flood water will remain within water courses, which will actually off this application site. And therefore, these houses won't flood in the event of a flood event, including when climate change is added into that. They have no objection to it. So I suppose it's academic that it's in flood zone 2, because I was asking the Environment Agency whether they're going to update their maps to remove flood zone 2. They said not at the moment, because the developer needs to make a separate application to update the map, which the developer is going to do. And I know from experience that it takes 3 to 4 months for the Environment Agency then to update the map. So strictly speaking, there's still flood zone 2 on the site, but we believe ultimately that will be removed once the developer puts in their application to update the map. Right, the screen's not moving on to the next slide. It's not doing anything, unfortunately.
It's not the
Trying to show you
back, so it's not moving.
It's not checking. Right, let me just try and share again, and we can then move on to the next part of the presentation. There we go. So these are street scenes of the house sites and the flats themselves. So the top one, street scene A, is basically the northern boundary of the site facing the A413. Sorry, no, it's not. It's along the main street here. So this shows the 4-storey building in the corner, closest to the A4130, the 3-storey development, creating enclosure to the street scene, limited gaps other than where we've got streets themselves. So these 3-story heights moving through, and that's responding to the design code for this part of the site, reflecting what we've permitted on the other side of the road. The street scene BB here is showing the frontage to the A4130. And what we've tried to do there is create height on that frontage with 2.5-story buildings, 3 stories, 4 stories on the initial corner, and then to bookmark the streets, where the streets moving north-south, we've got 2-story buildings. We move on to streets in C, which is the southern boundary, facing onto what will be a parkland. Again, we've tried to get, we've got some 3-story buildings and some 2-story at the end there. Again, trying to get a distinctive feel to that overlooking the parkland. Then the secondary street through the site, we've got 3 stories, creating some interest. We're trying to get driven with 2-story buildings with gable ends fronting that street. Then just moving on to some artist images of the development. This is the entrance to the site from the A4130. So we've got the 4-story buildings on the corner and the 3-story enclosure on that main road. And that secondary street I'm showing, we've got some 3-story development, but largely 2-story buildings. The material is basically a red-brown brick. Got some paneling just to break up the elevations and some render as well, all in accordance with the design guide we have for the site. So ultimately, Chair, we feel the site is proposed is development plan compliant. It complies with that design code for the site. The recommendation to you is one of approval.
Thanks very much, Adrian. I'm sure we'll return to you for some questions once we've heard from our speakers on this application. So we have 2 speakers, Aaron Wright and Daniel Ives Bennett, who I think are both speaking in favour.
Just Aaron.
Oh, just Aaron. Okay, just Aaron. So Aaron Wright, please do join us. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining us this evening. As with everyone else, you have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to address you this evening. We would firstly like to thank your officers for working closely with us over the past 18 months and for their continued support and collaboration. We are seeking a reserved matters application for approval for the development of Parcel 1T at Valley Park, known as Primrose Gardens. The scheme will comprise of 246 high-quality homes that will provide a mix of houses and apartments and tenures to meet a variety of local needs. The proposed density and range of house types complies with the requirements of the design code. The scheme provides 35% affordable housing, and these will be pepper-potted across the site and designed to be indistinguishable from the private homes. 5% of the affordable homes and 2% of the market homes will be constructed for wheelchair users. The proposed scheme has been carefully considered to ensure a high standard of design across the site and in compliance with the Strategic Design Code, as well as the national and local government guidance. The aim is to create a high quality and sustainable place to live, which integrates with the wider Valley Park development and surrounding area. The Council's urban designer is fully supportive of the scheme and has confirmed that all key design issues have been resolved. Each home has secure cycle storage in accordance with OCC highway standards, and the development has been designed with safe streets for all users with 20-mile-an-hour speed limit across the whole development. The scheme is fully compliant with the Council's parking standards, and OCC highways have raised no objection. To enhance the sustainability of the site, we will be using air source heat pumps, no gas. This goes beyond current building regulations and enhances our sustainable approach towards future home standards. All our homes will have electric charging points and solar panels and are fully compliant with the nationally described space standards. A sustainability assessment has been submitted in support of the application to demonstrate our commitment to sustainability. Ecological enhancements, including the provision of bat roosts, bird boxes, bee bricks, insect hotels, hedgehog highways, and native planting, are all incorporated into this scheme, and the Council's ecologist has raised no objection. A high-quality landscape scheme is designed to include a new street planting and native planting, as well as the provision of public open space in the form of a pocket park. all our gardens meet the Council Community Space Standards.
You have 30 seconds.
Thank you. The Council's drainage engineer, Environment Agency, Thames Water and OCC drainage team have all raised no objection. We are pleased to confirm that we're providing defibrillators at Valley Park, and we will have a temporary one outside our sales area as requested by the parish councils. And we're also providing 6 EV charging bikes located outside our sales area, and these can be used by residents or the public to connect to the Milton Business Park and the surrounding area. The scheme presents an opportunity to provide a high quality development that will create an attractive and long lasting place to live. I hope the members can support your officer's recommendation and grant reserved matters consent to this scheme. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll now ask if any members of the committee have any questions for you. Councillor Lawson.
Just a Myron, you mentioned that all the houses are going to have air source heat pumps. I'm curious why the decision for air source over ground source when it's a entirely new site.
I think we're just starting to get used to kind of the new standards, and I think we're starting with air source heat pumps. I'm sure that Taylor Wimpey will be looking at ground source heat pumps, in the future. But at the moment, it's air source heat pumps, and we won't be using gas. So we're working towards future home standards, and our next phase of development that we're hoping will be supported as well will also be future home standards, and obviously our sustainability criteria changes, we can always look at that in the future.
Any further questions? Can't see any, so I'll say thank you very much for your time this evening. And now I'll move on to any questions we have for our officer. So has anyone got any questions for Adrian May? I can't see any, so
there are.
Sorry.
I'm just waiting for somebody else to say what, because I'm always chirping in.
Sorry. Well, in which case that can be like chirp away, I guess.
Did the Environment Agency come on site? Or did they do it all up on their plan? Did they come on site, the Environment Agency?
I have no idea.
Because they don't come on site now.
They may have done, and they don't tell us that.
So it was a sort of desktop job, was it? And
it's a bit like as planning officers who do a lot of desktop work.
Yeah.
They may well have gone.
Yeah, I always think it. I always think it's quite good to have them on the side and whatever. I think this is really quite a good. I think excellent the work that you've done with them. Flooding is always an issue, as you say, but we don't seem to have any objection. Again, I'm looking at the objections. One of them I noted was the play area. There was a. Could you show me where the play area is? I'm sorry, I must be a bit blind or something. If you can point.
The play area is this land. It's locally a quick area of play. It's not actually in the application side, but we actually permitted that play area last month in March.
The comment was that it was near the main road, but it isn't near the main road, is it?
It is. And the main road is here.
Yeah.
It's not the A road, I think. It's
No,
not the A road.
No, that's fine.
So you have the play area here,
yeah.
And then to the south is a larger, we call it common park. It's going to be sports pitches, open space, tennis courts, that kind of thing as well.
No, that's fine. It's just I picked that up, and the safety. It's been looked at by the police and the safety. I've noticed there was 1 or 2 comments about courtyards and lighting.
Yeah, the police have looked at it. Our urban designers looked at it and satisfied. And I know the police they would like to see electric gates on some of the courtyards, and we've got no guidance. So you must have electric gates on courtyards. So it's nothing we can insist on. As it's designed, it's quite a reasonable access to the site, which, for example.
Yes, and I like the walls, etc. I think it's a good balance. Thank you. I think that's all really I have to say.
Very much.
Yeah, so just as a question, if for some reason that this site doesn't get moved out to flood zone and this thing, what would actually happen? I know it's unlikely based on what you said, but what would actually happen if you were able to meet that condition?
Well, it's our discrepancy to say this is acceptable or not in terms of flood zones 2. With the evidence we have and the technical response we're getting from people like the Environment Agency, our own drainage officer, and the County Council drainage officer, none of them got any objection on flood grounds. So the conditions of technicality, you could say it's contrary to that condition, but then we've got no evidence to back that case and say what the harm is, because the experts are telling us the site's not going to flood.
Yeah, it's just that, you know, recent history would suggest that sites do flood, but you don't expect them to flood for all kinds of reasons, you know, to do with upstairs and we too close to rain on us. But so what we're saying, this is purely a technicality, and if the unlikely scenario happened where this permission wasn't granted to, or the map wasn't redrawn, redrawn, then we would need to look at it again.
We need to look at it again because we'd be making a decision tonight to either. But to approve, if we approve it tonight, then there's no opportunity to look at the condition again, other than
it fails the condition.
It fails the condition that terms it doesn't comply with the condition. And then if we say it doesn't comply with the condition, where it's a matter of what evidence do we present, say it doesn't comply with the condition because because there is no it's not going to flood. Well, and there are biases. They've looked at it in terms of the impacts of climate change as well. And looking at 100 year flood events, 1,000 flood events, and there may be some scenario where you get a downpour or whatever it may be. They could flood any part of the site. I mean, it happens, as we know, but there is no evidence to say that flooding, streams flooding, are going to cause any flooding on this particular site.
Then logically you wouldn't bother with the condition.
The environment agency asked for the condition in an outline stage.
Yeah, I know.
And they're now saying
with the evidence they've got presented to them, they are convinced that there's no flood risk history.
Chair, perhaps just add, there's two elements here. One is the planning arguments, which is the evidence, and it doesn't support the fact it is or this site should be in a flood zone now, because there's mitigation and the modelling work being done shows it's not going to flood. There's also another process which then the applicant will go through, which is to get flood zone 2 and 3 changed on the mapping, so that when they come to sell the houses and people do land searches, they can sell the properties, because people won't get buying property if they can see it in
mortgage.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it will happen down the line, and the developer no doubt will push pretty hard, I'm sure, to achieve that. But we need to focus on the planning element, which is there is no evidence before you that says this site is going to flood, and we have a statutory consultee who's confirmed that in writing.
Councillor Shaw.
Yeah. Which houses are actually potentially affected by flood zone 2?
So it's around about 34 dwellings. Basically, it's the house flats here, and it cuts across under these carports. There's a flat above that carport into this area, and it moves up down into the site. And then basically through there.
But more or less the central strain.
And it's probably no more than 4 or 5 metres wide.
Any further questions? In which case I'm going to suggest we move into debate. So I'm going to ask for a motion on this application.
I think we should accept this application.
Okay, do I have a seconder? Councillor Hannaby. Right. Is there any debate? Does anyone want to say anything on this application?
I think it's a very good-looking part of the estate, and I'm very pleased with the design and the bulks, where they put the bulks, etc. I'm quite impressed with it. I like the walls, the brick walls, the safety aspect of it, which obviously we need. So, well, the Environment AG, I think, is completely dead loss about anything like this. We just have to hope that that we do our jobs the right way and people will build in the right manner. And I think really, I think it's good.
No
So-
technical objections. It's always nice when developers go further than the building regulations require, particularly when it comes to climate.
Well, you know I
mitigation.
want plain water, don't you? You know
Yes.
that I want it completely
So,
out and going
you know,
around.
we're always pleased to do it.
To me, it's not complete unless we're harvesting the water. But yeah,
Councillor Biggles.
No, I was just going to say it's good to see solar panels that kind of some for the people and no gas. I'd also add that they seem to have a nice kind of. I was looking quite close at the detailed plans and the way the affordable housing and
yeah.
spread it around makes sort of sense to me. It's not all kind of clustered in one particular corner.
Cycle ways.
Very good. Right, so shall we take a vote on this unless anything further? Right, all those in favour of accepting this application? Those against? Any abstentions? Okay, that passes. Cool. Thank you very much. We now have one final item on the agenda this evening, which is to receive a report from the head of planning on appeals information. So, Adrian, could you introduce this for us?
Thank you, Chair. So this is the first time we've brought appeals performance and casework for you to consider, and it is here for information. You will recall some time ago the Planning Advisory Service reviewed some of our ways of working, particularly last year. And this is one of their recommendations is that we do bring to you.
To leave.
Sorry, please, you can leave, but please do so quietly. Yeah.
And then we can really concentrate on what this is all about.
Apologies for the interjection, but we'll allow people to leave. Okay, perfect.
Right, sorry about that.
Oh, hang on. So I was waiting to see it. Cool. Perfect. Thank you. Perfect. Excellent. Please continue.
So you recall last year we had the Planning Advisory Service come in to look at our ways of working, and they made some recommendation. One in particular was it's important that you as a committee are aware of the local planning authority's performance in terms of appeals, but also in terms of speed of decision making. And on part of the report before you, that is the quality bit. I've got a page in front of me at the moment, but it's a table 1 that's in the agenda that sets out the quality of our decision making. The other aspect, which is about the casework, basically. So the other 2 tables is the appeals lodged and appeals that have been decided, in particular in terms of March. So in terms of understand there's particularly the performance element, that will be coming to you on a quarterly basis, whereas the casework, so the number of appeals lodged and those that have been determined, will be here on a monthly basis. So each of your planning committees will get updated. In terms of the quarterly data, so table 1, just to explain it, I suppose, really, in terms of we call it lower is better. There's a threshold of 10%. Basically, it is an assessment over a 2-year period in terms of percentage of all decisions made by the local planning authority that are allowed at appeal. And therefore, that's why the lower percentage is the better way to be. You'll see for majors and for minors, we're well down in terms of the percentages, so we're doing pretty well. And that's important in terms of maintaining that position to go forward. Out of interest, just in terms of our decision making, we do have a higher percentage of the major appeals, and we have much lower into the national average, that is, and we have a lower percentage of appeals that are being allowed, again, against the national average, that's for majors. And for non-majors, again, we're below the national average in terms of the number of appeals we get. And again, we're way below the national average in terms of the performance. So overall, doing pretty well, I would suggest. Happy to take any questions.
We'll probably have another appeal tonight.
So are there any questions? Generally speaking, this is
No, I
important.
think well done.
And I think it's a good inclusion on the report.
So I did have a question. I mean, I read the report with interest, and I also read the emails that are coming out on specific cases with interest as well. One thing I was going to say, would it be possible to do some lessons learned type document, and maybe back that into upcoming training, which I know you like to. I mean, I know you do. The planning team do very good training for councillors and for themselves as well. But it'd be good to do some lessons learned on, particularly around formulating the reasons for approval as well as the reasons for rejection, to be able to defend appeals. But also to make more balanced judgments. I think is a better better decision actually.
Yeah, I mean, certainly because the next training session for you is in May. And as part of that, we will pick up some of the appeal, the trends that we can see coming in appeals to help you understand what inspectors looking at and where we've been very successful recently on things like character, for example. But the trend does change, and again, it will relate back to our policy. We've also got a local plan that is still fairly strong in terms of its position, but also we've got a new local plan coming on stream as well, which we can make sure that those policies are ones that will be robust in terms of being able to defend and support what you want to see happen on the ground, and we can defend that appeal.
Any further questions? In that case, I'll take it the report is noted. I look forward to seeing future reports on these agendas moving forward. And with that, I bring the meeting to a close. Susie, can you confirm with the live stream ended? Excellent. I apologize. I normally do my thank you at the end. Thank you for all the work in the offices, etc. But I realised I closed it before I did that. But anyway, no, thank you. There were two tricky applications